The sun beat down mercilessly as Thomas wiped the sweat from his brow, squinting at the readings on his ground-penetrating radar screen. 6 weeks into what was supposed to be a routine geological survey in the remote Egyptian desert, and he had nothing to show for it. Just endless sand and disappointment. Once a respected archaeologist with a promising career, Thomas now found himself taking whatever work came his way. The academic community had turned their backs on him 3 years ago after he published a paper suggesting connections between ancient civilizations that his peers deemed too speculative. Universities stopped returning his calls. Research grants evaporated. All he had left was his reputation as a meticulous field researcher, which had landed him this contract job with an oil company. "Anything interesting over there?" called out Nadia, the team's geologist. Her voice carried across the empty desert, the only sound besides the gentle hum of equipment. Thomas shook his head. Just more limestone formations. Nothing worth reporting. But as he adjusted the settings on his equipment, something caught his eye, a strange anomaly in the readings, forming a perfect geometric pattern about 7 meters below the surface. He tapped the screen, thinking it might be a glitch. The pattern remained. "Hey Nadia, can you come look at this?" he called, trying to keep his voice casual despite the sudden racing of his heart. She trudged over through the sand, her boots leaving deep impressions that disappeared almost immediately in the wind. Leaning over his shoulder, she studied the screen. "That's odd," she said, frowning. "Too symmetrical to be natural. Maybe leftover equipment from previous surveys?" Thomas shook his head. "No, it's too deep and too large." He pointed to the scale markers. "Whatever this is, it's massive." By evening, Thomas had convinced Nadia and the rest of the small team, Ahmed the local guide, Lee the technician, and Carlos the project supervisor, to authorize a small exploratory dig. The company wouldn't miss a day's worth of survey time, he argued, and if it turned out to be nothing, they could get back on schedule immediately. As the sun set, turning the desert from gold to purple, Thomas sat alone by the small fire outside his tent, scribbling calculations in his worn notebook. This region wasn't known for archaeological significance. It was too remote, too harsh. But the dimensions on the radar matched architectural proportions he'd seen before in ancient structures. "You really think there's something down there, don't you?" Ahmed asked, appearing silently beside him with a cup of tea. Thomas accepted the tea gratefully. "I don't know. Probably nothing. Just an unusual rock formation." Ahmed smiled knowingly. "You don't believe that. I can see it in your eyes." The next morning, they began to dig. Carlos had authorized the use of one of the company's excavators, but Thomas insisted they proceed carefully once they got below the surface layer. By midday, they had cleared away nearly 6 meters of sand. "We should be getting close," Thomas said, climbing down into the excavation pit. He brushed away sand with a small hand trowel, working carefully. The team gathered around the edge, watching. His trowel struck something solid. Not rock, something smoother. He cleared more sand away with his hands, revealing a surface that caught the sunlight with an unusual gleam. "Hand me a brush," he called up, and Lee tossed one down. With careful strokes, Thomas cleared more of the surface. "What is it?" Carlos called down impatiently. Thomas couldn't answer immediately. He was staring at a perfectly smooth surface that seemed to reflect light with a golden hue. Not rough limestone or sandstone, but something polished to perfection. "I think," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think we found something important." Within hours, the small excavation had revealed a 2-meter section of what appeared to be a sloped wall. The surface was limestone, but unlike any Thomas had ever seen, infused with something that gave it a golden sheen when sunlight hit it directly. "We need to call this in," Carlos said, already reaching for the satellite phone. "Wait," Thomas pleaded. "Let's understand what we're looking at first." "It's obviously a structure," Carlos replied. "Probably some unknown tomb or temple. The company will want archaeological authorities involved immediately." Thomas knelt by the exposed section, running his fingers over the smooth surface. "Look at these seams," he said, pointing to where 2 massive blocks joined together. "They're perfect. You couldn't slide a piece of paper between them. And this material, it's not just decorated with gold. It's actually integrated into the limestone somehow." Nadia knelt beside him, examining the stone with her geological tools. "He's right. This isn't like anything I've seen before. The gold appears to be part of the crystalline structure of the rock itself. It should be impossible. By sunset, they had exposed enough of the structure to confirm what Thomas had begun to suspect. The symmetrical slope, the perfect construction. They were looking at the upper section of a pyramid, buried almost completely beneath the sand. But there aren't supposed to be any major structures in this region, Lee said, comparing their GPS coordinates with archaeological survey maps. The nearest known ruins are over 100 kilometers away. That night, the camp buzzed with activity. Carlos was on the phone with company executives. Ahmed spoke with local contacts about whether there were any legends about structures in this area. Nadia continued analyzing samples of the strange golden stone. Thomas sat apart from the others, looking out at the stars. After years of academic exile, was it possible he'd stumbled upon something that could redeem his career? Or was this just another dead end that would lead nowhere? You should be celebrating, Lee said, sitting down beside him and offering a chocolate bar. This is a major find. Thomas broke off a piece of chocolate. We don't know what it is yet. It's a pyramid, Lee said. A golden pyramid, in the middle of nowhere. That's what doesn't make sense, Thomas replied. Pyramids weren't built in isolation. They were part of complexes, near population centers and water sources. What's one doing out here all alone in the desert? The next morning, official vehicles began arriving. Word had spread quickly. Thomas watched as archaeological authorities set up a perimeter around the site. His small team was interviewed separately, their discovery documented in precise detail. An older woman wearing a crisp white shirt approached Thomas as he packed his equipment. Dr. Reynolds? She asked, extending her hand. I'm Dr. Fatima El-Hamid, Director of Antiquities for this region. Thomas shook her hand, surprised to be addressed by his academic title. Few people used it anymore. Your discovery is quite extraordinary, she continued. Initial testing suggests the structure has been buried for approximately 2,000 years. That would place it in a period between major dynasties, a gap in our historical record, Thomas nodded. The construction technique doesn't match known Egyptian methods from any era I'm familiar with. And the material itself? Yes, our preliminary analysis confirms what your geologist found. The gold is somehow integrated with the limestone at a molecular level. We've never seen anything like it. She studied him thoughtfully. Your name sounds familiar. Thomas looked away. I published some controversial work a few years ago. Ah, yes, she said, recognition dawning. The interconnected civilization theory. Quite bold. He waited for the usual dismissal, but instead she smiled. Perhaps it's fitting that you made this discovery. We're assembling a team for a proper excavation. Would you be interested in joining us as a consultant? Your careful approach prevented damage to what might be an invaluable site. Thomas stared at her, momentarily speechless. Yes, of course. Over the next week, the excavation expanded. As more of the structure was revealed, Thomas's excitement grew. This wasn't just any pyramid. The dimensions were different from the Great Pyramids of Giza or anywhere else. And as they cleared more of the golden surface, strange symbols began to appear, hieroglyphics unlike any in the archaeological record. Standing at the edge of the excavation pit, watching dozens of workers carefully removing sand from what was increasingly clear, was a magnificent structure. Thomas felt a sense of vindication and wonder. Whatever was buried here had remained hidden for 2 millennia, waiting to be found. Dr. Reynolds called one of the junior archaeologists, waving him over excitedly. We found something you should see. Thomas made his way down the scaffolding that now lined the excavation pit. The team had uncovered what appeared to be an entrance, a seam in the otherwise perfect surface. There's some kind of mechanism here, the young archaeologist explained, pointing to indentations around the seam. And look at these markings. Thomas examined the symbols carefully. They resembled star constellations arranged in a pattern around what might be a door. Something about their arrangement tickled his memory, similar to carvings he'd documented years ago at sites thousands of miles apart. We'll need to document everything before attempting to understand the opening mechanism, he said, but inside, his mind was racing with possibilities. Whatever lay inside this golden pyramid, buried under sand for 2,000 years, was about to change everything. Thomas could feel it. After years of ridicule and exile, he stood on the brink of a discovery that might rewrite history. And this was just the beginning. News travels fast in the archaeological world. By the end of the week, the temporary camp around the Golden Pyramid had swelled to include researchers from 3 universities, government officials, security personnel, and most concerning to Thomas, a growing number of journalists and curiosity seekers gathering at the perimeter. "This is getting out of hand," Thomas muttered, ducking into the command tent to escape a photographer's long-range lens. Inside, Dr. El-Hamid was speaking tensely on the phone, her free hand gesturing sharply as if the person on the other end could see her frustration. "Absolutely not," she said firmly before hanging up. She looked up at Thomas with weary eyes. "The tourism minister wants to announce a grand opening ceremony. Next week," she shook her head. "Politicians. They see only dollar signs, not the historical significance." Thomas dropped into a folding chair. "We've barely scratched the surface. We need months, not days." "Exactly what I told them." She sighed, spreading out satellite images of the site. "But we have another problem. Look." The images showed tiny dots approaching from the northwest, vehicles moving fast across the desert. Taken this morning. "Our security team says it's treasure hunters." The story leaked online, exaggerated claims about the gold content of the pyramid. Now every criminal with a jeep and a shovel thinks they can get rich quick. Thomas felt sick. He'd seen it before. Important sites ransacked overnight, priceless artifacts appearing on the black market, history lost forever. "What can we do?" "I've requested military protection, but it will take time to arrange." She tapped her pen against the map. "We need to work faster. Secure the entrance. Document everything. If looters break through our perimeter, at least we'll have records." Over the next 3 days, Thomas barely slept. The team worked around the clock in rotating shifts, cataloging every symbol, photographing every inch of the pyramid's exposed surface. Security guards patrolled the perimeter, but everyone knew they were outnumbered. On the 4th night, Thomas was examining the entrance mechanism when he heard shouts and engines revving in the distance. He grabbed his radio. "Activity at the north perimeter." "Already on it," came the reply from the head of security. "But they're coming from all sides. Too many to stop." Dr. El-Hamid appeared beside Thomas, her face grim. "We need to get inside now." "What?" "We haven't fully documented the entrance. The mechanism will be destroyed if we wait," she cut him off. "Listen." Gunshots echoed in the night. The security team was firing warning shots, but it wouldn't hold the looters back for long. "Your theory about the constellation alignment," Dr. El-Hamid said. "If you're right, we might be able to open it." Thomas looked at the symbols surrounding the door. He'd been studying them for days, comparing them to ancient star charts. "I think it's set to open during specific astronomical alignments, but we'd need to wait months for the right positioning." "We don't have months. We don't even have hours." She pulled a powerful laser pointer from her pocket. "What if we simulate the light pattern?" It was crazy, but it might work. Thomas quickly directed the team to position high-powered lights at precise angles, matching the constellation pattern he believed would trigger the mechanism. The sounds of engines and shouting grew closer. "Ready?" Thomas asked, his hand hovering over the switch. Dr. El-Hamid nodded. "Do it!" He flipped the switch. Light beams hit the symbols in sequence, matching the pattern of stars as they would appear during the summer solstice. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a deep exhalation, the seam in the pyramid widened. Dust that had been settled for millennia billowed out as the stone door receded inward. "Get everything inside," Dr. El-Hamid ordered. "All the equipment, all the records." The team scrambled to follow her instructions, carrying cases of tools and computers through the opening, just as the first shots rang out at the camp perimeter. "Everyone in," Thomas shouted. The last researcher darted through the doorway just as Thomas heard engines approaching. He took one last look at the chaos erupting outside. Looters breaking through the security line, gunfire, people running, then stepped inside. "How do we close it?" someone asked frantically. Thomas examined the inner side of the door. The same constellation symbols were mirrored here, but arranged differently. Understanding dawned on him. "It's a reversed pattern," he said, quickly positioning their lights to match the new configuration. The moment the last beam hit its target, the massive stone door began to slide closed. It sealed with a deep resonant sound that reminded Thomas of a cathedral bell. Darkness enveloped them. Then gradually a soft blue glow began to emanate from the walls themselves, growing brighter until the entire passageway was illuminated. "Impossible," whispered one of the researchers. "What is this material?" Thomas touched the wall. It felt cool and slightly textured like stone, but it was giving off light with no apparent power source. Something we've never seen before, he replied. Outside, they could hear muffled shouting and occasionally something striking the door, but the stone was thick, at least 2 meters, based on what they'd seen during excavation. They were safe for now. Dr. El-Hamid did a quick head count. 17 of us. All the core research team made it, thank goodness. What about the security team? The others at the camp? Thomas asked. She shook her head grimly. They knew the evacuation plan. Get to the vehicles, drive to the nearest military outpost. She didn't need to say that some might not make it. I've got no signal, one of the technicians reported, holding up his satellite phone. We're inside a massive stone structure, Thomas pointed out. We shouldn't expect communication. Dr. El-Hamid straightened her shoulders. We came here to explore, and that's what we'll do. We're safe for the moment. Let's see what this place has to tell us. The passageway sloped gently downward, lined with the same light-emitting material. As they advanced, Thomas documented the hieroglyphs that covered the walls, symbols unlike any he'd seen in his career. Some resembled traditional Egyptian writing, but with crucial differences. It's like looking at a language that split off from ancient Egyptian and evolved separately, he explained to the team. Similar roots, but thousands of years of independent development. The passage opened into a circular chamber with 5 additional corridors branching out like spokes on a wheel. Each doorway was marked with different symbols. We should split up, suggested one of the junior researchers. Absolutely not, Thomas and Dr. El-Hamid said simultaneously. We stay together, she continued. Standard archaeological procedure. We'll explore methodically, starting with this central chamber. The room contained what appeared to be a map, a 3-dimensional model of the pyramid's interior. Floating above a pedestal in the center of the chamber, it seemed to be projected somehow, though there was no visible technology. Another impossibility, murmured Thomas, circling the display. This kind of projection technology shouldn't exist in a 2,000-year-old structure. As the team documented the chamber, Thomas studied the map closely. It showed a complex of rooms and passageways, far more extensive than he'd imagined. At the heart of the pyramid was a large chamber, marked with a symbol that appeared repeatedly in the hieroglyphs. What Thomas had begun to interpret as meaning, knowledge or possibly wisdom. Look at the construction. Techniques, whispered Dr. El-Hamid, examining the walls with her magnifying glass. These blocks aren't just perfectly fitted. They're fused somehow, as if the stone was melted at the seams and then solidified. Thomas nodded. No civilization from this time period should have been capable of this level of precision, not without technologies we've never found evidence of before. As the hours passed inside the pyramid, the team lost track of time. Their watches still worked, but the concept of day and night became meaningless in the blue-lit passageways. They explored carefully, documenting everything, finding more questions than answers. In one room, they discovered what appeared to be astronomical charts, showing star positions and planetary alignments spanning thousands of years. In another, they found perfectly preserved artifacts, tools made of an unfamiliar metal alloy, containers of unknown purpose, and delicate instruments that resembled nothing in the archaeological record. These people, Thomas said, examining a device that seemed designed to measure something with incredible precision. Whoever they weren't just ahead of their time. They were operating with knowledge that wouldn't be rediscovered for millennia. Dr. El-Hamid nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps your theories weren't so controversial after all. Thomas looked at her sharply. What do you mean? Your paper. About connections between ancient civilizations. About shared knowledge that shouldn't have been possible given the distances and barriers between them. She gestured at the room around them. What if this was the source? Or one of them? The idea was staggering. Thomas had risked and lost his career suggesting that certain ancient cultures had shared too many advanced concepts to have developed them independently. His colleagues had mocked him, calling his work speculative nonsense. But here was evidence unlike anything the archaeological world had ever seen. A loud boom echoed through the passageways, making everyone jump. They're still trying to get in, one of the technicians said nervously. Dr. El-Hamid checked her watch. We've been inside for nearly 16 hours. Military support should have arrived by now. As if in answer, they heard a new sound, the whop-whop-whop of helicopter blades, followed by megaphone announcements too muffled to understand. Sounds like the cavalry has arrived, Thomas said. But I'm not sure I'm ready to leave. Dr. El-Hamid looked around at the room full of artifacts and mysteries. No, she agreed. Our work here has only just begun. 3 days later, a temporary research base surrounded the Golden Pyramid. Military personnel guarded the perimeter, while international news crews gathered at the designated press area half a kilometer away. The attempted looting had made headlines worldwide, adding to the mystery and allure of what people were now calling the Desert Star. Inside the pyramid, Thomas stood with his hand pressed against a wall covered in strange symbols, feeling a slight vibration beneath his fingertips. There's something happening behind this wall, he told Dr. El-Hamid. Some kind of mechanism. She joined him, placing her palm flat against the smooth surface. I feel it too, like a pulse. The wall symbols here were different from those in other chambers. Rather than historical records or star charts, these appeared to be instructions, a sequence of some kind. The pattern repeats every 7 symbols, Thomas said, tracing the markings. And look at these indicators, they're directional. One of the younger researchers, Alice, had been documenting the blue luminescent material that lined the walls. She looked up from her instruments. The light intensity changes with the time of day. It's subtle but measurable. Brightest at noon, dimmest at midnight. Thomas raised an eyebrow. But we're underground. How would the material know what time it is outside? Maybe it doesn't, Dr. El-Hamid said thoughtfully. Maybe it's responding to something else. The Earth's magnetic field, some natural cycle we haven't identified yet? Thomas turned back to the wall symbols. What if these aren't just decorative or linguistic? What if they're functional? For the next several hours, the team documented every symbol on the wall, mapping their positions and relationships. Thomas noticed something peculiar. 7 indentations spaced evenly across the bottom of the wall, each with a different symbol above it. I think these are meant to be pressed, he said, but in a specific sequence. Dr. El-Hamid frowned. If we press the wrong sequence? Thomas shrugged. Then either nothing happens or we trigger a defense mechanism that's been waiting patiently for 2,000 years to crush us all. She shot him a look. Your optimism is inspiring. That's why they pay me the big bucks, he replied with a tired smile. Neither of them had slept more than a few hours at a stretch since entering the pyramid. Thomas studied the repeating pattern of symbols across the wall. I think the sequence is here, he said, pointing to a particular set of markings that appeared slightly more prominent than the others. 7 symbols, just like the 7 indentations. Even if you're right about the sequence, Dr. El-Hamid said, should we really be activating unknown mechanisms in a structure we barely understand? Thomas looked around at the team of researchers, all watching him expectantly. That's literally our job description. With careful precision, he pressed the indentations in the order indicated by the wall pattern. As his finger touched the final one, a low humming filled the chamber. The vibration beneath his hand intensified slowly. Silently, the entire wall began to recede into the floor, revealing a passage that hadn't been visible on any of their scanning equipment. Well, Thomas said quietly, that just happened. The new passageway sloped upward, contrary to the downward trajectory of all previous corridors. As they followed it, Thomas noticed the blue luminescence growing brighter, pulsing slightly as if encouraging them forward. The material composition is changing, Alice reported, scanning the walls with her instruments. Higher concentration of the unknown element. The passage ended at a circular door unlike anything they'd seen in the pyramid so far. Rather than stone, it appeared to be made of a metal-like material with a faint golden sheen. Most striking was its center, a crystalline disc that caught and refracted the blue light in dazzling patterns. It looks like a lens, Thomas murmured, examining it without touching, or a focus point of some kind. Dr. El-Hamid consulted the 3-dimensional map they'd discovered earlier. This room isn't on the map. A secret within a secret, Thomas said. Something hidden even from those who might find their way inside the pyramid. The crystal disc was surrounded by concentric rings of symbols. Unlike the historical hieroglyphs elsewhere, these were mathematical in nature, precise geometric patterns and what appeared to be numerical notations. It's a puzzle, said Thomas after studying it for several minutes. The rings can rotate. Sure enough, when he carefully touched one of the outer rings, it moved smoothly along its track with minimal resistance. These symbols, Dr. El-Hamid said, pointing to a sequence, They match the constellation patterns from the entrance. Thomas nodded slowly, an idea forming. The entrance was keyed to the summer solstice alignment. What if this is similar but more specific? He began rotating the rings, aligning the constellation symbols with what he believed was a representation of the sky on a very particular date. If I'm right, he explained as he worked, this is showing the stars as they would have appeared the day this pyramid was completed. As he aligned the final ring, the crystal disk began to glow more intensely. Hairline seams appeared in the door which had seemed solid moments before. With a soft hiss of equalizing pressure, it split into sections that retracted smoothly into the wall. Brilliant golden light flooded the passageway, momentarily blinding them. As their eyes adjusted, the researchers gasped collectively. Before them lay a vast chamber, larger than should have been possible given the pyramid's external dimensions. The ceiling soared at least 30 meters above them, its entire surface covered in what looked like a living star map, points of light moving slowly in accurate celestial patterns. The walls were lined with shelves containing crystal tablets and strange devices. But it was the center of the room that drew everyone's attention. There, suspended in midair with no visible means of support, rotated a perfect globe of Earth. It showed land masses and oceans in precise detail, slowly turning exactly as the real planet did. "This is impossible," whispered Alice, her scientific equipment forgotten in her hands. Thomas approached the floating globe carefully. "It's not a projection," he confirmed after circling it. "It's physically present, but hovering." Dr. El-Hamid was examining the crystal tablets on the shelves. "These appear to be some kind of information storage," she said. "Etched with symbols more complex than anywhere else in the pyramid," another researcher called out from across the room. "Dr. Reynolds, Dr. El-Hamid, you need to see this." They joined him by a pedestal holding what looked like a mechanical device of incredible complexity. It featured intricate gears, crystals, and delicate metalwork, all arranged around a central viewing port. "I think it's an astronomical instrument," the researcher said, "but its precision. Nothing like this existed 2,000 years ago. Nothing like this existed 200 years ago." Thomas peered through the viewing port and felt his breath catch. The device showed stars and galaxies with perfect clarity, as if he were looking through the most powerful modern telescope. But as he watched, the view shifted to show a spiral galaxy he recognized immediately. "That's Andromeda," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Over 2 million light-years away. Not visible to the naked eye as anything but a faint smudge." He stepped back, his mind racing. Whoever built this place had knowledge of celestial bodies that weren't discovered. Until the 20th century, Dr. El-Hamid had moved to another section of the chamber where large crystal panels displayed what appeared to be maps, not just of Earth, but of the entire solar system. "Thomas," she called, her voice unsteady. "These maps show coastlines that don't exist." He joined her, studying the detailed Earth map. She was right. While the continents were recognizable, some coastlines were dramatically different. Florida was nearly half its current size. Islands existed where there should be open ocean. "No," Thomas said slowly as understanding dawned. "They do exist, or they did. This shows sea levels as they were during the last ice age, when more water was trapped in glaciers. And this," he pointed to another map, "shows coastlines as they'll appear if all the ice caps melt. That's thousands of years in the past, and potentially the future," Dr. El-Hamid said. "How could they know this?" Thomas shook his head, overwhelmed. "I don't know, but it's clear whoever built this place possessed knowledge that was lost to history, knowledge we're only now rediscovering." As the team spread out across the chamber, carefully documenting everything, Thomas found himself drawn to a small alcove partly hidden behind one of the shelves. Inside was a single crystal tablet, larger than the others, placed on a pedestal of its own. Unlike the other tablets, this one glowed with an inner light that pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. The symbols etched into its surface were different too, not measurements or star charts, but what appeared to be a narrative. As Thomas studied it, he realized with growing excitement that he could begin to decipher some of it. The symbols shared enough commonality with the other hieroglyphs that patterns were emerging. "I think this tells their story," he said as Dr. El-Hamid joined him. "Who they were, why they built this place." She leaned closer, her eyes widening. "Can you read it?" Not fully, but I'm starting to understand fragments. He pointed to a recurring symbol. This appears to mean knowledge or wisdom, and this sequence here, I think it's talking about preservation. Saving something. Thomas looked around the magnificent chamber at the impossible technologies and the knowledge they represented. I think this place was built as a time capsule, he said quietly. A repository of everything they knew, preserved for future generations to find. But why hide it? Dr. El-Hamid asked. Why bury it in the desert where it might never be discovered? Thomas had no answer, but as he looked back at the glowing tablet, he felt a connection across time, to the people who had created this marvel and entrusted their legacy to the future. I don't know, he admitted. But I intend to find out. Word about the chamber's discovery spread quickly. Within days, the Egyptian government established a formal research station around the pyramid with international oversight. The site was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Location in emergency session, the fastest such designation in history. Thomas barely noticed the politics happening outside. For the past week, he'd been completely absorbed in the crystal tablet from the hidden alcove, working alongside Dr. El-Hamid and a team of linguists to decode its message. It's like trying to learn a new language by reading a single book, he explained to General Haddad, the military officer now in charge of site security. We recognize patterns, but context is everything. The general nodded, looking uncomfortable among the strange artifacts. The president is coming next week. He expects answers. Science doesn't operate on political timetables, Dr. El-Hamid replied sharply. We're making progress, but these discoveries could upend everything we know about ancient civilizations. That takes time to process properly. After the general left, Thomas returned to his workstation where dozens of photographs of the tablet were spread out. He'd been mapping recurring symbols, creating a rudimentary translation key. I think I've got something, he said, pointing to a sequence near the beginning of the tablet. This section appears to be talking about origins, not just of the pyramid builders, but of knowledge itself. Dr. El-Hamid leaned over his shoulder, studying his notes. What kind of origins? That's the strange part. Thomas highlighted several symbol groups. These refer to stars, specifically stars that aren't our sun. And these symbols keep appearing alongside references to what I believe means home or birthplace. Alice, who had been monitoring the floating globe in the center of the chamber, called out to them. You should see this! The globe is changing. They joined her by the floating Earth model. Sure enough, the land masses were shifting subtly, coastlines receding and advancing as if showing the planet's geography evolving over time. It's going backward, Thomas realized, showing earlier and earlier geological periods. They watched, transfixed, as continents drifted into unfamiliar configurations. The Mediterranean Sea disappeared, becoming land. Ice sheets advanced and retreated across the northern hemisphere. It's a history lesson, Dr. El-Hamid whispered, showing Earth's changes over millions of years. Eventually, the globe settled on a configuration none of them recognized. Continents arranged in entirely different positions, with unusual mountain ranges and inland seas. I don't think this is Earth's actual past, Thomas said slowly. At least not one geologist have evidence for. Then what are we looking at? Alice asked. Thomas turned back to the crystal tablet, a new theory forming. What if we've been asking the wrong question? We've been wondering how an ancient Egyptian civilization could possess this knowledge. He gestured around the chamber. But what if they weren't Egyptian at all? What if they just built here? Dr. El-Hamid's eyes widened. You're suggesting? I'm suggesting we're looking at a repository of knowledge from a civilization that predates anything in our historical record. One that either died out or what? Alice prompted when he trailed off. Thomas pointed to the symbols referring to stars. Or didn't come from here originally. The idea hung in the air. Too outlandish to dismiss given the evidence surrounding them. Too extraordinary to accept without absolute proof. We need more, Dr. El-Hamid said finally. More translation, more understanding of these artifacts. She turned to Alice. Have the material analysis results come back yet? Alice nodded. The preliminary findings are confusing the lab. The blue luminescent material contains elements not on our periodic table. They've run the test 3 times thinking it was contamination or equipment failure. Thomas wasn't surprised. Every new discovery in the pyramid pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible. He returned to the crystal tablet, more determined than ever to unlock its secrets. Days passed in a blur of translation work. Thomas slept in the chamber, unwilling to leave even when his eyes burned with exhaustion. The text was yielding its secrets bit by bit, revealing fragments of an incredible story. "Listen to this section," he told Dr. El-Hamid during one of their late-night sessions. "The great journey across the endless dark took 7 generations. Those who began never saw its completion. Those who arrived never knew its beginning. A multi-generational journey," she mused. "Like early human migrations across continents?" Thomas shook his head. "I don't think so. Look at the context. These symbols for dark are the same ones used in their astronomical charts to represent deep space. Outside the pyramid, the situation was growing tense. Countries around the world were demanding access to the discoveries. Conspiracy theories flourished online. Religious groups held vigils, declaring the pyramid everything from a sign of the apocalypse to proof of their particular faith. Inside, protected from the chaos by thick stone walls and military guards, the research team made a breakthrough with one of the mechanical devices found in the chamber. "It's activating," called one of the technicians who had been carefully documenting the astronomical instrument. The intricate device hummed to life, as if it had been used yesterday, not dormant for millennia. Its gears moved silently, crystals glowed with inner light, and the viewing portal expanded into what could only be described as a 3-dimensional projection floating in the air. It showed a star system, not their own, with multiple planets orbiting a red sun. One planet was highlighted, rotating slowly to show continents and oceans not unlike Earth's. "This must be where they came from," Thomas whispered, awestruck. "Their homeworld." The projection shifted, showing the planet's orbit deteriorating, moving closer to its sun. Next came images of massive ships launching from the planet's surface, followed by what appeared to be a journey through space, ending with arrival on Earth. "They were refugees," Dr. El-Hamid said softly. "Their world was dying and they came here." Thomas nodded slowly. "That explains the advanced knowledge. They brought it with them. And this pyramid, these devices, they're not just a record of who they were, but a warning." "A warning about what?" He pointed to the shifting Earth globe, which now showed coastlines retreating under rising water levels. "History repeats. They lost their world to natural disaster. They're showing us that we could lose ours too." As they watched, the device's projection changed again, showing mathematical calculations and orbital mechanics that even their best scientists would need months to interpret. "We need to bring in more experts," Dr. El-Hamid decided. "Astrophysicists, climatologists, geologists. This information is too important to keep locked away in academic journals and classified reports." Thomas agreed. "But we need to be careful. There are groups out there who'd use this discovery to create panic, or twist it to fit their agendas." That evening, as most of the team rested in the camp outside, Thomas remained in the chamber with only 2 security guards for company. He sat cross-legged before the crystal tablet, reviewing his translation notes. A pattern was emerging that troubled him. Certain symbols appeared with increasing frequency toward the end of the text, symbols he had tentatively translated as cycle, return, and awakening. "What were you trying to tell us?" he murmured to the long-gone creators of the pyramid. As if in response, the chamber's lighting pulsed once, brighter than ever before. The floating globe stopped its rotation, then restarted, but now showing current Earth geography with glowing points marking specific locations around the world. "What's happening?" asked one of the guards nervously. Thomas approached the globe, studying the illuminated points. "These are coordinates," he realized. "Each one precise." He pulled out a notebook and began writing them down. "Coordinates for what?" the guard asked. "I don't know yet." Thomas counted the glowing points. 21 locations spread across every continent. The guard radioed his superior while Thomas continued documenting the coordinates. When Dr. El-Hamid arrived 30 minutes later, looking sleep-rumpled but alert, the globe was still displaying the marked locations. "Any pattern to them?" she asked after he explained. "Not immediately obvious. Some are in deserts, others in mountains or jungles. One appears to be underwater in the Pacific." They worked through the night, mapping the coordinates and cross-referencing with geological and archaeological databases. By morning, Thomas had a theory. "I think they're showing us where to find the others," he said, circling a location in the Gobi Desert on their map. "Others?" Dr. El-Hamid raised an eyebrow. Other repositories, other pyramids. Thomas spread out his translation notes. The text mentions 21 keys to one door. I thought it was metaphorical. But now, he gestured to the globe with its 21 glowing points. You're suggesting there are 20 more structures like this around the world? Dr. El-Hamid looked stunned. Not exactly like this one, but connected somehow, parts of a greater whole. Thomas ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Think about it. A civilization advanced enough for interstellar travel wouldn't put all their knowledge in one place. They'd create redundancies, backups. But why hide them? Why not share their knowledge openly with early humans? Thomas had been wondering the same thing. The tablet mentions a time of readiness, I think. I think they were waiting for us to reach a certain level of development before we could understand what they left behind. He looked around at the impossible chamber with its hovering globe and star maps, and I think that time is now. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. Thomas found himself addressing the United Nations General Assembly, explaining the discoveries to a world both fascinated and frightened by their implications. The Golden Pyramid is just the beginning, he told the assembled leaders, his voice steady despite his lingering discomfort with public speaking. We believe similar repositories exist at the 21 locations identified by the Earth globe. 3 expeditions are already underway. After his speech, as diplomats argued about jurisdiction and access rights to the newfound sites, Thomas escaped to a quiet balcony overlooking the East River. Dr. El-Hamid joined him, offering a much-needed coffee. You did well in there, she said, leaning against the railing beside him. Thomas shook his head, watching boats move along the water below. 3 years ago, these same people wouldn't return my emails. Now they're fighting over who gets to fund my research. That's how it always works, she replied with a knowing smile. Today's heretic is tomorrow's prophet, if they live long enough to be proven right. Thomas sipped his coffee, thinking about how much had changed. The academic colleagues who had ridiculed him now cited his work. Universities offered him prestigious chairs. Publishers were bidding for his memoir. None of it mattered as much as the work itself. Any updates from the Gobi team? He asked. Dr. El-Hamid checked her phone. Nothing new. They reached the coordinates yesterday and set up ground-penetrating radar. The Chinese government is being very cooperative. Thomas nodded. Of the 21 locations, the site in China's Gobi Desert had been prioritized based on satellite imagery, showing unusual ground formations. The other 2 active expeditions were in the Brazilian rainforest and underwater near Easter Island. His phone chimed with an incoming message. As he read it, his pulse quickened. The Russian Academy of Sciences confirmed anomalous readings at the Siberian coordinates, he told Dr. El-Hamid. They're requesting technical assistance. She smiled. 4 for 4. That can't be coincidence. Back in Egypt, the original pyramid had become the center of intense international cooperation. The chamber with the floating globe now housed a multidisciplinary team of scientists working around the clock to understand the technology and translate the crystal tablets. Progress was slow but steady. They'd confirmed the pyramid builders arrived on Earth approximately 15,000 years ago, fleeing a dying star system. They established outposts around the world, sharing some of their knowledge with early human civilizations while keeping their most advanced technologies secured in hidden repositories. What remained unclear was why they eventually disappeared, leaving only these silent monuments behind. 2 weeks after the UN presentation, Thomas was in Beijing when the call came through from the Gobi expedition. We found it, said the team leader, her voice crackling with excitement over the satellite connection. Different from the Egyptian structure, but definitely artificial and definitely ancient. We're sending images now. The photos showed a massive stone disk half buried in desert sand, its surface covered in the same strange symbols found in the Golden Pyramid. Initial dating put it at approximately the same age, 2,000 years old. They've started excavation, Thomas told Dr. El-Hamid over video chat later that evening. The Chinese brought in their military to secure the site. Same story in Brazil, she replied. Their team found what appears to be a crystal obelisk in a cave system. The symbols match ours. Thomas leaned back in his hotel chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what they were uncovering. It's really a global network, just like the tablet suggested. The question is, what was it designed to do? Why create repositories on every continent? Before Thomas could answer, another call came through, the Easter Island team. Their underwater exploration had located a submerged structure with the same characteristics as the others. "4 confirmations," Thomas said after ending the call. "I'm flying to the Gobi site tomorrow." 3 days later, he stood at the edge of a massive excavation pit in the Mongolian desert, staring at the fully exposed disk. Unlike the pyramid in Egypt, this structure was flat and circular, nearly 100 meters in diameter. "We found an entrance yesterday," explained Dr. Wang, the Chinese archaeologist leading the dig. She guided Thomas to a section where the team had cleared away sand from a seam in the otherwise seamless surface. "Any idea how to open it?" Thomas asked, examining the area. She shook her head. "We were hoping you might have insights from the Egyptian site." Thomas studied the symbols surrounding the seam. They were similar to those at the pyramid entrance, but arranged differently. "The Egyptian door responded to light patterns matching star positions," he explained. "But the configuration here is unique." He spent hours photographing and analyzing the entrance symbols, comparing them to his translation notes from the crystal tablet. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert, he noticed something. "The shadows," he said suddenly. "Look how they fall across these markings." As the sun descended toward the horizon, its rays hit the disk at an angle, creating a pattern of light and shadow that aligned perfectly with the entrance symbols. "It's a sundial," Thomas realized. "The entrance can only be opened at sunset on specific days." Calculations based on the symbol position suggested the next viable opening time would be the following evening. The team worked through the night, setting up equipment to document whatever happened. As the sun sank below the horizon the next day, the light and shadow pattern aligned exactly with the entrance markings. With a deep rumbling sound, the seam widened, revealing a stairway leading down into darkness. "Just like Egypt," Thomas murmured, "but completely different mechanism." The team descended cautiously. Unlike the Egyptian pyramid's blue luminescence, this facility was illuminated by a soft green glow emanating from the walls. The architecture was similar, perfect construction with no visible seams, but the layout was entirely different. In the central chamber, instead of a floating globe, they found what appeared to be a massive crystalline computer, humming faintly as if it had been waiting for visitors. "It's active," whispered Dr. Wang. "After 2,000 years. Thomas approached the crystal structure carefully. Its surface displayed symbols that shifted and changed as he moved, responding to his presence. "I think it's some kind of interface," he said. When he tentatively touched the surface, the crystal glowed brighter. Symbols appeared that matched specific sequences from the Egyptian tablet, the ones he'd translated as relating to a network and awakening. Over the next month, similar breakthroughs occurred at the other sites. Each repository contained different technologies and information, but all shared the same symbolic language and construction techniques. Most importantly, each one activated upon discovery, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Back in Egypt, Thomas stood once again before the floating globe, watching as it now showed all 21 sites glowing brightly. 17 had been confirmed, with expeditions on their way to the remaining 4. "It's like pieces of a puzzle," Dr. El Hamid said, joining him. "Each repository contains different knowledge: medicine in Brazil, agriculture in Siberia, physics here in Egypt. And when combined?" Thomas asked softly. "That's the question that keeps me awake at night," she admitted. A year to the day after Thomas first discovered the golden tip of the pyramid poking through the desert sand, he published his findings in a global simultaneous release. The paper, co-authored with 52 scientists from 27 countries, detailed how the repositories formed an interconnected knowledge bank left by visitors who had arrived on Earth during the last ice age. The public reaction ranged from wonder to fear, from religious reinterpretation to calls for secrecy, but the evidence was too substantial to deny or suppress. In his personal conclusion to the paper, Thomas wrote, "These repositories weren't created for a single nation or people, but for all of humanity when we reached a point of readiness. The builders foresaw our potential for both greatness and self-destruction. They left us their knowledge not as a shortcut to advancement, but as a mirror to recognize ourselves, a species capable of interstellar travel, of building wonders that last millennia, of surviving planetary catastrophe through cooperation and foresight. The greatest gift they left wasn't their technology, but their example. They showed us a possible future, one where knowledge transcends borders, where we think in terms of generations rather than fiscal quarters, where we act as caretakers of our world rather than its exploiters. Whether we use this knowledge to follow in their footsteps or to forge our own path is now entirely up to us. As the world debated and discussed the implications, Thomas returned once more to the Golden Pyramid. In the quiet of the central chamber, surrounded by the soft blue glow that had first welcomed them inside, he placed his hand on the crystal tablet that had started everything. "Thank you," he said simply to those long-gone builders who had buried their legacy in the sand, trusting that someday someone would find it. In that moment, as if in response, the floating globe pulsed once with golden light that illuminated the chamber like a newborn sun.